Well, the first time I met Srila Prabhupada was, I'd only been in the movement a few months. That was in '73. And it was a very brief uh, encounter. We had driven from Denver to New Vrindavan for the New Vrindavan festival. There were probably 8 devotees who packed into a little Toyota pickup with a camper on the back. And we took off and went from Denver straight through to New Vrindavan. And when we got there, that time of year, the weather is a little unforgiving. And so it was rainy, muddy, and this and that. But we were so much into the experience that we didn't really care. It was quite amusing. And the devotees who were living there in New Vrindavan at the time, this was the original farm where Vrindavan Chandra lived, and right next door was Kirtananda's place, and Prabhupada was staying there. We went up a little bit further into the hills where they had a pandal set up and a garden for cooking, a kitchen, that's what it was. And that's where we stayed. We just camped out in the bushes. And you know, that time of year it rains, so it rained. But anyway, we were so blissful just to be there. And all I could meditate on was the moment I would be able to see Srila Prabhupada. And the old temple room there where Vrindavan Chandra were residing was a very small little house. The temple room is really, really small. And it was so packed out, you couldn't do anything. You couldn't get close. I happened to get into the doorway, and to the left would be the deities, and straight ahead would be Srila Prabhupada. And all the assembled devotees would have their backs to the deities looking at Srila Prabhupada. And Prabhupada sat in his Vyasasana. He was, I don't remember the conversation. I don't remember the discourse. All I can remember was looking at him, this beautiful man who I'd been meditating on forever. And in Denver, all we had was a picture of Srila Prabhupada on the Vyasasana. So I just had it in my mind to see this wonderful golden person. And I was just mesmerized. All I could do was just look at him as he had his eyes, as his eyes were gently scanning the devotees, and sometimes he would close them and he would speak, and it was just an out-of-world experience. I can never forget it. It's just totally ingrained in my mind. Despite the whatever inconveniences we had to go through, in the morning the devotees would bathe in this little hole right next to the Goshala. They happened to have a piece of wood, or I think it was a pallet or something like that, and the devotees would take this cold stream in the morning and take a bath. But it didn't matter, you know. We were just so grateful to be there. The next time we saw Srila Prabhupada was in 1974 in San Francisco Rath Yatra. And we had driven down again from Denver. And there were again a lot of wonderful devotees there, and Guru Kripa Swami at the time, and so many others. Vishnu Jan was there, and I think the most I guess the most moving thing for me that time was how Srila Prabhupada was chanting Jai Radha Madhava in the temple room. And he was chanting so deeply. It was such an emotional chanting. I swear, I was standing about midway toward the back, and all I could do again was I got fixated on watching Srila Prabhupada. And to me, it looked like tears were coming from his eyes as he was chanting. And the devotees in front were also crying. It was such a wonderful emotional experience. And I think what I learned from that was how sincere a devotee has to be to really appreciate Krishna consciousness. And it helped me to appreciate Srila Prabhupada as an exalted devotee as he was. One morning we got a chance to go on a walk with Prabhupada, and Prabhupada went to this park where there's a big golf course. He got out of the car and started walking through the parking area, and walked up to the curb edge where the grass was, and he felt it with his cane. He didn't even step, he just sort of touched it with his cane, and oh no, it's wet. So Prabhupada didn't walk on the grass. He just walked back and forth in the parking facility. And at one point, one golfer came by and greeted Prabhupada. Prabhupada said, "Good morning." And the gentleman said, "Good morning," and went off on his way with his golf cart. And Prabhupada turned and said, "What is he doing?" And one of the devotees explained to him that, "Oh, he's playing golf, Srila Prabhupada. They take this stick and they hit this ball into a hole," and Prabhupada for a moment there, he just looked, and then he looked at the devotees, and I was standing right very close to him. And Prabhupada said, "Just see how they're wasting their valuable life." After the fire yajna, I was asked to go into Srila Prabhupada's room for the Brahman's thread and the Gayatri. And I went into Srila Prabhupada's room and offered my obeisances, nice and loud. And Prabhupada motioned to me to come sit next to him. So I got, fairly close, but he said, no, come closer. So I was real close. So we were like, 2 inches away. And Prabhupada asked me to put out my hand, and he grabbed it, and he began showing me how to chant the Gayatri on my fingers. And he said, "Okay, now you do it." And so I did it, and I thought I did it right, and he said, "No, do it again." And so I was shaking like a flag in the wind. I didn't know what was left or right or up or down. I was just so happy to be close to where Srila Prabhupada was, and it was unsettling to say the least. But again, he said, "Do it one more time, do it again." And I said, so I went through it again, and he said, "No." And then he looked at me, and he said in a very nice, loving way, I didn't feel chastised, but I felt so grateful for it. He said, "How can I teach you if you can't remember?" And I felt like a worm, under 10,000 rocks. I was thinking to myself, actually the first thing that came to my mind was, wait a second, I did this right, but no, then I caught myself in my mind. I was like, no, you can't think like that. And I did it. I couldn't even say anything. I just did it one more time again, and I did it real slow and carefully. And when after the third time, Srila Prabhupada, he said, "Oh, very good. That was very good." And then he took the thread and he just sort of tossed it, and it just sort of floated and landed over me. He didn't even have to. He didn't, go through any big ordeal to put it on me. He just took it and he sort of tossed it. I was sitting to his left, I remember, and then he said, "Okay, that's very nice." And again, the lesson was that as a disciple, one should never become presumptuous and think that you know something before your spiritual master. That's a no-no. One should always be meek and humble, and I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful that Prabhupada said that line just has stuck in my head my whole life. That if you can't remember what the spiritual master is telling you, then how do you expect to advance in spiritual life? If you can't remember, then how can someone teach you? If you can't, then you have to do something to focus your mind so that you can remember. You have to follow the practices of Krishna consciousness so that you can remember. I'm so grateful that Srila Prabhupada corrected me like that, and I'm so thankful that I didn't open my big mouth. I'm so grateful that I did not open up my big mouth and start thinking that, no, wait a second, I did that right. No. We again saw Srila Prabhupada, had the good fortune of being in Chicago when Srila Prabhupada went there for a visit. I remember very vividly how Srila Prabhupada was chanting on the Vyasasana. He was leading the kirtan. And he was facing Kishore Kishori. He was at the far end, and the devotees were in between. And they started dancing back and forth. And they started getting really wild, dancing back and forth, and Prabhupada stopped it. And he said, "But we don't dance like that. We just dance back and forth to the Swami in a very proper, gentle way, a gentlemanly way." And instead the devotees were, they were racing back and forth, bumping into each other. And a similar thing happened in Mayapur a year later when the devotees were also a little too enthusiastic. But it stuck in my mind how Srila Prabhupada wanted us to dance in a very respectful way, in a proper way, in a more reverential way, and not just some careless jumping around, like some mash pit or something. After Prabhupada spoke, there was some prasadam given, and Prabhupada had had a plate of prasadam, and he tasted one of the items. And he said, who has put salt in the halva? Where's the cook? So they asked the cook to come, and the cook had to come before Srila Prabhupada. This was Prabhupada's on the Vyasasana, and all these devotees are here, and the cook has to come up. And oh, I felt so sorry for them. And Prabhupada asked, what is this? You've put salt in the halva. And the cook, I won't mention her name, but she said, oh, Krishna's mercy. Oh, it was the wrong thing to say. And Prabhupada, he was very, he didn't explode, but Prabhupada said, no, it is your foolishness. And what I understood from that was that everything we do in Krishna consciousness, we should be very attentive to, even the smallest details. Even the smallest details. Because Krishna is there in the heart and he's aware of what we're doing, as is the spiritual master. It's not that you're hiding off in some place or nobody knows what you're doing, no. But Krishna is there, the spiritual master is there, and one has to be very attentive in offering your service to Krishna. It's an important practice. Otherwise, how do you expect to develop devotion? It doesn't work like that. In Vrindavan, Prabhupada, during that same festival time, would have darshan in the evening, and we were able to squeeze in a couple times. And although Srila Prabhupada was, in much of it he spoke Hindi, he was so casual and friendly with some of the local devotees, Brijbasis, and you could see how they were so fascinated by and not only fascinated, but I guess they were so thankful and also respectful how Srila Prabhupada had gone off like this to the West and brought back so many of these Westerners who were just enthusiastic to chant and read and visit the holy places of Vrindavan. And they would sit in Prabhupada's class. In the evening, Prabhupada would give Hindi class, and devotees didn't understand a thing, but they would all sit there and just be able to see Srila Prabhupada. And the pilgrims would come in, and they'd be fascinated to see how all of this is happening by the work of this incredible person. What stood out for me in Vrindavan was how in this sacred place, these locals could see how Srila Prabhupada has created such a wonderful sacred place as Krishna Balaram Mandir. It was very, very special. I think for me the most important thing that, or the thing that's impacted me the most has been Srila Prabhupada's kindness. My experience in material world, whatever experience I have, is that it's a very harsh place, and to find a friend is very, very difficult. So when I saw and had the opportunity to meet Srila Prabhupada, I felt that this is a real friend. This is a real, genuine, kind person who is there to help us through whatever challenges are there, and bring us closer to Krishna. I think that's the thing that stands out the most for me, how kind and loving he was to his followers, to people. Je anilo